Welcome back to StarCraft 2 Co-op Guide, where I teach you how to not be me. I don't know if it's just pure laziness or literally any other excuse to use effective methods in RTS games like hotkeys and effort, which ultimately lead to a massive loss of life, normally at a defeat due to biting off more than I can chew. However, mass loss of life doesn't seem to bother this commander in the slightest. Alarak, Highlord or Edgelord of the Taldareem, a faction of Protoss that lives in a master-servant society, which explains a lot of Alarak's methods. Alarak himself keeps that style and incorporates it into his army in both figuratively and a literal way, while the commander focus is divided into 3 sections: damage, damage, and more damage. Technically, that's 4 words instead of 3, but you get my point.
You think us fools?
Yes, but that is irrelevant.
Leading the charge like a true leader, Alarak himself being the primary focus of both damage and sustainability due to infantry and heavy support from mechanical units that are just a little too pricey if you ask me. Starting out, Alarak is spawned from the Nexus, and despite being a hero unit, he does not have a lot of health or shields at all. This is due to his passive ability called Soul Absorption. Every kill he gets restores 20 health and 20 shields. Now, being the Highlord means that every other life besides his own holds quite literally no value, making him the absolute king of casualties, more so than Zagara, as when a unit dies, it still has value even in death. However, getting out damage shows up a lot more than you would think, and this is where his fail-safe plan comes into play, which is able to take the life of his own units just to keep him alive, making him the most entitled person to exist. However, troops are not unlimited, therefore most of the healing will be done by killing, and his abilities make that job a little too easy if you ask me. Deadly Charge, the first ability that deals absolutely massive damage to a single target that is mainly used for tanky units like Ultralisks and any form of hybrid that have a stupid amount of health plus structures. Or at the end of the day, if you want to use it to just close the distance between the enemy to take the minimal amount of damage possible before you absolutely go ham on their forces. Destruction Wave is for those massive amounts of enemies. While it doesn't do a lot of damage compared to Deadly Charge, makes up for it in its upgrade to increase its knockback by 100%. This makes an excellent tool for slowing large enemies or absolutely decimating smaller forces in an instant or a few uses. So if Alarak needs a bit of space and taking too much damage, use this ability and he'll have his space. And the final one is Empower Me, an absolutely disgusting ability due to how useful and how devastating it is. It is probably hands down his best ability in his entire arsenal and kit combined. This is the entire reason why Alarak should be on the front lines, and even though yes, it does have a very long cooldown and absolutely zero opportunity to reduce it whatsoever, a unit of his own or allies are able to boost Alarak's overall attack damage for each ally that is in close proximity. I swear, I've had some times where Alarak is doing over 300 damage a single hit, and yes, this does boost abilities as well.
Forces in combat. You pledge your...
Bad news, commanders. Attack wave is coming for your truck.
Your base is becoming a liability.
Moving on up to the top bar abilities, which can simply be said in Overkill Defense and Overkill Attack. Structure Overcharge is a defensive ability capable of not only putting a heavy shield on a structure, but turning it into a source of damage with insane fire rate and range. Holding up to 3 charges at max, it can be used to hold off heavy enemy attacks or simply open up base expansions earlier than normal. Not too bad for its overall uses. And last of all the abilities is the Death Fleet. It is as menacing as it is powerful. It is the literal meaning of overkill, summoning a mothership with a glassing cannon that focuses on maximum loss of life. And then there's the destroyers that are accompanied by the Death Fleet. These are Void Rays, except they have a Taldareem spin where instead of actually having survivability, they're all about damage, which you're probably not surprised by that. The Void Rays normally increase damage the longer they stay on a single target. Destroyers don't have that ability, but they do have the ability to deal damage to all nearby enemies besides the target. So they are going to be doing a lot of area effect damage. As it goes for Alarak's army, infantry is mainly going to be supporting Alarak in the short-term way for, reasons. Supplicants being the main soldier and the backbone to Alarak's army. I mean, a sacrifice. They really do get the shaft when it comes to their role. Being the backbone of the army, which goes from low damage, no anti-air, and a small amount of health with the life expectancy of an anti-vax kid. However, they do become a formidable force in large numbers and through upgrades, which works out for being trained in pairs of 2. Having a shield, strength, and capacity upgrade makes them last longer in combat, ultimately until Alarak or Ascendants need a little bit of life or power. Slayers are your all-around units. They have coverage in all areas, which makes them good at everything but not amazing at anything. Dealing more damage towards armored units, while the blink is able to temporarily increase damage and the ability to ignore damage for a certain set of time. They can be used in a spamming fashion, except the fact that they have coverage in all areas, which doesn't exactly add to the whole entertainment factor of an army like that. Just keep in mind that they're mainly going to be used for air coverage and really nothing else. Havocs are your support units, which I feel they go a little underrated. Like, yes, they have no damage, and yes, they have no health, and yes, they cost a lot of SP as a starting out unit. While they don't do damage directly, they are capable of increasing the damage dealt to whatever the Havoc is basically targeting up to 30%. Its health is somewhat made up in the form of permanent cloaking, which makes the enemies possible to hit him drastically lower. The main reason why I think they're honestly really underrated is the fact that they have an upgradable aura, which increases the range of all ranged attacks by 2. You don't even need a lot of them. Just make sure that whatever army you have, make sure you have enough of them, and they will honestly turn all of your armies into long range, making them survive a lot longer in combat. And finally, for the sacrificed infantry, which can do some sacrificing of their own, is the Ascendant, which is all damage, no health units that have a consistent weak basic attack, but all the main source of damage comes from their abilities that use energy, which has its own problems of relying on energy. Their abilities like Mind Blast deals an insane amount of damage, especially against shields or enemies that have their own energy bar, and my favorite, the Psionic Orb, which is able to basically shoot a giant red orb down an entire lane covering a very large area, and much like the Destruction Wave, is able to cover a large area, except it does a bit more damage. Now when you stack on this, it becomes extremely deadly. They are fragile units with low health and low shields, so the power overwhelming upgrades becomes almost necessary as they gain 25% ability damage and 100 shields for every supplicant sacrificed to them. They really get the shaft here. This makes their damage output through the roof. Just keep in mind that you will need to protect them early, mid, and late game. They are always going to be weak and they're always going to need protection, and they ain't cheap to replace. Your infantry units will be the ones to be sacrificed to Alarak, starting with the supplicants, which is quite a nice decision on Blizzard's part, as it goes for the cheaper units are sacrificed first before the most expensive ones. However, as the game goes on, you will not only need more heavy firepower beyond Alarak, but troops that will stay in the long run. War Prisms are more of a utility unit than anything that has very sweet synergy with the commander's ability as well. War Prisms are able to transport small amounts of units inside of them, so I would reserve this for troops that cannot deploy through power fields like any other of his mechanical units, which are going to be the next two due to their slow speed and deployment. Their unique gimmick is that when they deploy, they turn into a mobile power field. A flimsy one. You can make sure you can get your sacrifices anywhere on the battlefield for Alarak to use. Deploying also makes them also technically turn into a structure, which means it is completely possible to use structure overcharge on them, turning into a powerful and limited long-range turret. And here, ladies and gentlemen, is my favorite unit by far. I love Havocs, but these guys, oh, they're too strong. Vanguards are my favorite unit by far. Combined with Havocs makes for one deadly combo. Vanguards are the Taldareem's version of Immortals, except that Immortal thing doesn't stay, as the heavy shielding is replaced with artillery guns on both sides. And they can cover quite a large area, when upgraded of course. Havocs give them that range bonus plus that 30% more damage plus an additional 7 more damage against armored targets, making your defense or offense really easy. They're great at offense, but absolutely devastating on defense. And now to end Alarak's arsenal in this section of the video, which is Wraith Walkers. Again, a Taldareem spin on the Colossi, which takes away the 2 firing lines that burns all enemies, is rather in range or pass through the fire after the shot is taken. However, surprisingly, they're affordable, at least from Protoss standards. Instead, has a long-range, slow-firing, but extremely high damage shot that can deal a base of 100 damage and double against structures. With upgrades of increased fire rate and the ability to target air is an absolute must. Despite all of this unit is surprisingly more affordable than the Templar version or the Purifier version. However, keep in mind that it is still a late tier unit, which means it's going to require a bit investment in structures to unlock it, and the fact that it is going to need those upgrades in order to become extremely strong. And that is it for Alarak's units. So at the end of the day, your infantry units are more going to be like a short to mid-term investment, while mechanical units, due to their high price, will be very long-term and a very big investment. And after learning all the units in the armies and what their capabilities are, I would make sure that every single game, no matter what you're spamming, is to make sure not only do you have Havocs for support, but you also have the ability to take care of anti-air. Because again, while Alarak does have a very strong anti-air, he very much is very inconsistent with it, as there are enemies on the ground that he also has to deal with. So I think it'd be best if you honestly always have an army that has anti-air capabilities, or you make the infamous mixed army. And last up is the mastery skills, which are honestly impactful to say the least. Power set 1, in my opinion, is best used to increase Alarak's attack damage by 30 to a total of 60. Alarak, as you already know, is basically able to carry the army on his back and more. And his army is just back there for support and for sacrifices, otherwise known as a second chance. However, the second choice to increase unit attack speed by 15% at maximum isn't bad as well. It's more of a specialization. Do you want to depend more on your hero unit, or do you want to depend more on your army? Power set 2 is completely dependent on your main source of damage and where it comes from, because both have a long cooldown anyways. Empower Me has a max duration increase of 30 seconds longer, which if you specialize in using Alarak, then great. But if you specialize in using more of your army, or feel that you get a lot more value in using your destroyers and your motherships, then you can use those upgrades on the Death Fleet or balance them all out. Power set 3 is divided into production focus of chrono boost by 30%, or to increase the total overcharge shield and fire rate by 60%. For this one, it's up to you what you like to specialize, whether to have a lot more defense or a bit faster for your unit production to any structure that has chrono boost active. To finalize the video, playing the game a ridiculous amount, you will be rewarded with prestige ranks at ranks 15, 30, 45. This will change the core mechanics, but keep the initial idea of the hero. Artificer of Souls still heals Alarak on a supplicant's death or unwilling sacrifice, but boosts the attack damage and attack speed of a nearby mechanical unit by 10%. This effect can stack up to 15 times at the cost of 50% of the damage done by Alarak's abilities, taking away his ability to carry the team for increased army efficiency. Tyrant Ascendant removes the ability of Call the Death Fleet to decrease the ability cooldown of Empower Me by 50% for a specialization on Alarak and not his army. And the last one, Shadow of Death, the opposite, but also not the opposite of Tyrant Ascendant, makes the mothership a buildable unit that can produce destroyers from its ship. This makes the cost of them turn to resources and population rather than a ridiculously long cooldown, but opens up the path for even more units at your disposal, making death a little bit more frequent than normal. And if you've made it to the end of the video, thank you. It really means the world to me. Truly. Between the kit, the commander himself, the army, the mastery abilities, and everything mechanized, I really hope that's all the information you need to get started to enjoy your time with Alarak and not, you know, fail. I honestly forget to say this every time I make one of these StarCraft videos, but every single commander that does not come with the free version, genuinely from the bottom of my heart, and I'm not sponsored in these videos, I'm not paid to say this, I genuinely believe it. Every single one of the commanders that you buy is genuinely worth the money. Well, I'm gonna leave the video off here. If you really enjoyed this series, if you love this video, hell, if you're loving me, be sure to scroll down below and hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with all of the content coming your way. With all this being said, this is ToxicSpill. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and remember, do stuff you love. Signing off.